Nicole Evans never thought she'd find herself sitting behind the defendant's table in a courtroom, facing the relentless accusations of murder. Her entire career as a detective had been dedicated to putting killers behind bars. And yet, here she was, caught in the unforgiving machinery of justice, accused of the very crime she'd sworn to prevent. All eyes in the courtroom were fixed on her, eyes filled with skepticism and silent judgment, the cold presence of their collective suspicion pressing in from every side. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Security cameras had captured a woman identical to Nicole at the precise moment the victim, Jared Monroe, was shot dead inside his apartment. Nicole's fingerprints had been found on the murder weapon, a handgun registered in her own name. A witness, whose credibility seemed unshakable, testified firmly that he had seen Nicole loitering outside Monroe's building just minutes before the gunshot rang out. Piece by piece, layer upon layer, the prosecution stacked the evidence neatly, sealing Nicole's fate. Yet Nicole knew the truth. She knew with absolute certainty she had never set foot near Monroe's apartment that night. But as the prosecutor hammered away relentlessly, methodically dismantling every shred of Nicole's defense, her protests of innocence seemed to matter less and less. She could feel her life slipping from her grasp, not because of what she'd done, but because of a perfect storm of fabricated reality that no one cared to question. In the spectators' gallery, Jason Brooks sat quietly, his gaze locked onto Nicole. Jason had been Nicole's partner and closest ally in the precinct for years. He'd witnessed her fight passionately for justice, seen her tirelessly investigate countless crimes, always searching for the truth, no matter how deeply hidden it might be. Jason understood Nicole, her integrity, her unshakable values, and in his heart, he was certain she was innocent. The sight of her sitting helplessly in front of a jury that seemed already convinced of her guilt ignited something deep inside him, a resolve he could not ignore. Across the courtroom, Inspector Mark Riley sat stiffly beside the prosecution, his eyes cold and determined. Riley was in charge of the Monroe murder case and had made it crystal clear from day one that he considered Nicole guilty beyond doubt. He had repeated this message to reporters, confident and authoritative, fueling a media storm that painted Nicole as a fallen hero turned killer. Every step of the case had flowed smoothly and swiftly, far too easily, as though choreographed by invisible hands. Suddenly, the oppressive silence of the courtroom was broken by a loud, unmistakable bark. All heads turned sharply as officers attempted to remove Chase, Nicole's loyal police dog, from the gallery. But Chase was defiant, refusing to budge an inch. The animal barked furiously, eyes locked on Nicole, growling at anyone attempting to move him. The officers struggled, unable to control Chase's fierce determination. Despite being highly trained and disciplined, Chase seemed ready to break every rule, every protocol, just to remain close to his partner. Nicole watched Chase, feeling a profound sense of anguish. Not for herself, but because she knew her truth might be buried forever if she didn't fight back. Seeing Chase reminded her of who she was, what she stood for, and all the reasons she'd chosen her life's path. She didn't fear the judgment awaiting her. What she feared most was the idea that justice itself could be so thoroughly corrupted. After Nicole was led away in custody, the department reassigned Chase to a new handler, hoping routine would bring him back in line. But the once tireless, sharp-minded dog became withdrawn, distant, ignoring commands and training sessions. His new handlers quickly noted how he seemed distracted, never eating properly, always waiting at the door as though expecting someone else to walk through at any moment. Soon, whispers circulated through the precinct. Chase wasn't fit for duty anymore. Perhaps retirement was necessary, or even retraining at a distant facility. When Jason Brooks heard the news, he felt compelled to step in. He volunteered immediately to take care of Chase, bringing the dog home with him, hoping a familiar face would ease the animal's distress. But Chase's behavior only intensified. Restless nights spent staring at Jason's front door, refusing food, lying quietly in corners as if silently mourning. Jason watched Chase closely, understanding that the dog was not simply grieving. Something deeper seemed to be at play, something that Chase was desperately trying to communicate. Days turned into nights filled with an unspoken tension. Jason struggled to sleep, haunted by Nicole's wrongful accusation and Chase's puzzling reactions. One evening, as Jason reviewed case files in his home, Chase suddenly growled low and deep, alerting Jason to something unseen beyond the walls. Without hesitation, Jason rose, instincts sharpened by years of police work. He moved cautiously toward the window, peering out into the quiet street. There was nothing visible, no movement, no threat, but Chase remained tense, unwavering, eyes fixated on some invisible force outside. Driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, Jason clipped Chase's leash on, opening the door and stepping out into the night air. As soon as they hit the pavement, Chase took off, pulling Jason forward decisively. The dog moved swiftly, clearly on a trail, and Jason understood immediately. Chase had picked up a scent that mattered deeply to him, one tied to Nicole's case. Minutes later, Chase halted abruptly in front of Monroe's apartment complex, the exact crime scene where Nicole's life had unraveled. Chase moved purposefully toward the alley, stopping at a nondescript spot on the ground. There, partially concealed by debris, Jason found something strange. A patch of synthetic skin-like material, disturbingly lifelike, yet obviously artificial. As Jason picked it up, his heart quickened, an unsettling realization taking hold. This discovery was no coincidence. It was a critical clue that could potentially unravel the carefully constructed narrative of Nicole's guilt. Standing there in the silent darkness, Jason knew that Nicole's fight was far from over. Her struggle had become his own, and he was determined not only to clear her name, but to expose the truth buried deep within the shadows of their own justice system. Back home, Jason carefully sealed the strange, skin-like fragment into an evidence bag, turning it slowly in his hands, studying every crease and texture under the dim lamplight of his living room. The material felt eerily human, supple, smooth, yet undeniably synthetic. Jason had seen countless bizarre things during his career, but nothing like this. Something inside him told him this discovery wasn't just important, it was pivotal. Whatever game was being played to frame Nicole had just become deeper and more dangerous. Days passed, but each hour dragged with an excruciating sense of urgency. While waiting for the forensic results, another unsettling news bulletin flashed across Jason's television. A prominent local businessman, Harvey Lane, had been found dead in his upscale apartment. Lane had been shot in circumstances strikingly similar to Jared Monroe's murder. Precise angles, neat crime scene, no apparent struggle. The police quickly labeled it a targeted killing, but Jason saw something else, a connection. He couldn't ignore the glaring similarities between Lane's murder and the one Nicole had supposedly committed. Chase reacted instantly to the broadcast, pacing anxiously, ears alert, a low growl vibrating deep in his throat. The dog's agitation confirmed Jason's suspicion. These murders were connected. Jason pulled up crime scene photos of Lane's apartment online, zooming in, scanning for anything unusual. He felt his pulse quicken when he spotted something subtle on the wall behind Lane's body, a faintly drawn triangle, slashed with a single thin line. Jason flipped quickly through the Monroe case files until he found a similar close-up. There it was again, the same obscure symbol, nearly erased, yet unmistakable. This was not coincidence. This was a signature. Whoever was behind these killings wasn't merely a murderer. They were sending a message, marking their targets openly, yet cleverly enough to escape casual detection. Jason knew he was stepping into treacherous territory. Whoever set up Nicole wasn't finished yet. The city was dealing with something much darker and more calculated than anyone had imagined, and it was clear Nicole had merely been an unfortunate pawn in this larger, sinister game. Jason dug deeper, scouring police databases for any matching symbols, any reference to similar cases. But every search ended in frustration. Nothing matched, nothing appeared in past records. He was chasing a ghost, a hidden force that seemed to control the narrative effortlessly. Feeling cornered, he turned to someone who thrived in shadows, someone who might recognize this invisible enemy. Dylan McKenna, an investigative journalist whose ruthless pursuit of truth had once nearly cost him his life. Dylan knew the city's underbelly intimately, where dark secrets simmered beneath the surface of daily life. They met quietly in the back booth of an old diner. Dylan listened carefully, his expression darkening with every detail Jason shared. Then Dylan revealed something chilling. Jared Monroe and Harvey Lane both had secret ties to an elusive network known as the Black Viper, an underground organization infamous for professional assassinations. This wasn't just about framing Nicole. It was a sophisticated, deliberate operation conducted by professionals who never left loose ends. The symbol at each crime scene was their calling card, intended to be subtle yet recognizable, a silent warning to others who might challenge them. Jason felt a deep unease. How could Nicole, a detective with a spotless record, have become entangled with such a deadly network? Dylan offered no reassurance. Instead, he warned Jason gravely that the Black Viper wasn't just well connected, they were embedded in places no one expected, including within the city's law enforcement. Trust, Dylan insisted, had become their most dangerous luxury. The forensic results from the synthetic material arrived at Jason's doorstep that night. The findings were shocking. It was a cutting-edge biopolymer, sophisticated technology used to create lifelike masks. Whoever framed Nicole had meticulously crafted a near-perfect disguise, undetectable to ordinary surveillance, and even capable of mimicking fingerprints through advanced replication methods. Jason's blood ran cold. This explained everything. The surveillance footage, the weapon, the eyewitness account. Nicole had never been at Monroe's apartment. Someone wearing her face had committed the crime. Yet, one troubling detail lingered in Jason's mind. The fabricated fingerprints on the weapon meant someone extremely close to Nicole had access to her personal belongings, intimate enough to steal prints without suspicion. This wasn't just a well-funded conspiracy. It was intensely personal, executed by someone she trusted implicitly. Jason barely had time to absorb this realization when another anonymous threat arrived, dropped ominously into his mailbox, a plain envelope containing a single typed note. "Stop now, or your dog will die first." Jason's pulse surged. They knew about Chase, about their investigation. This was no idle threat. It was calculated, ruthless, and chillingly specific. If Jason continued digging, he wouldn't be risking just his own safety, but also the life of the loyal companion who had become his ally in this tangled web of deceit. Soon after, Jason learned Nicole's execution had suddenly been rescheduled, moved forward to take place within 10 days, a highly unusual and disturbing deviation from standard legal processes. Jason realized this decision wasn't procedural. It was designed to silence Nicole permanently before he could expose the truth. He felt the noose tightening around them both, the unseen hand controlling events growing increasingly impatient. That night, unable to shake off the mounting tension, Jason took Chase for a walk, hoping to clear his mind. Yet, instead of a quiet stroll, Chase led him straight back to the alley near Monroe's apartment, the same spot where they'd discovered the synthetic skin. Chase began pawing urgently at a patch of dirt, uncovering a discarded leather glove stained with blood, hidden deliberately beneath the rubble. Jason bagged it immediately, rushing it to a trusted independent lab. When results came back, the DNA wasn't Nicole's. It belonged to Jacob Stein, a notorious hitman long rumored to have connections to the Black Viper. The significance was staggering. Stein's presence at Monroe's murder scene shattered the narrative against Nicole. She had been meticulously framed by a professional killer working directly for the city's darkest criminal network. The urgency intensified. Jason knew he had limited time. He had to act quickly, confronting the only person who could intervene immediately, Inspector Mark Riley. When Jason presented the evidence to Riley, he expected urgency and action. Instead, Riley reacted with unsettling calm, simply promising to look into it. Jason left the meeting uneasy, unaware that as soon as the door closed behind him, Riley calmly set fire to the glove and the report, destroying Jason's last tangible proof. It was now devastatingly clear. The very person leading the investigation into Nicole's case was part of the conspiracy itself, protecting the shadowy figures behind the Black Viper, erasing all evidence that could expose them. Jason knew they had crossed into perilous territory. The battle for justice had become a fight for survival, and trust was now their greatest enemy. Jason walked slowly through the city streets, head down, the cool air feeling sharp against his skin. He couldn't shake the heavy dread that had settled in his chest since leaving Riley's office. Handing over that glove had been a calculated risk, a litmus test. If Riley was truly working for the Black Viper, the evidence Jason had given him would vanish quietly into the void. But if he wasn't, if somehow Jason had misread him, then maybe there was still a chance for Nicole. Deep down, Jason knew the truth. though he refused to admit it yet. The system he'd trusted for years was infected by something malignant and powerful, and Riley was likely part of it. Chase trotted close beside him, vigilant as ever. The dog had become more than just his companion. Chase was his eyes and ears now, alerting him to threats he couldn't see. Every step Jason took felt like borrowed time, as if unseen eyes followed him from shadowed doorways and behind tinted windows. His phone buzzed, startling him. It was Dylan, texting urgently. "You just put yourself directly in their crosshairs. Meet me now." Jason's pulse quickened. Dylan's urgency was unsettling, but he had no choice. Within minutes, they sat in a dimly lit cafe, Dylan leaning across the table, tension etched deep in his eyes. He whispered rapidly, harshly, warning Jason that confronting Riley was reckless and dangerous. The Black Viper didn't issue idle threats. They executed swiftly, without hesitation. Dylan knew this firsthand. His scars, though hidden, ran deep from crossing powerful figures in the past. Dylan was certain that by handing over crucial evidence to Riley, Jason had triggered an immediate response from the network. Jason admitted softly that he knew he was being watched long before he ever confronted Riley. Strange cars parked outside his apartment, footsteps echoing on empty streets when no one else should have been around, shadows always just beyond reach. The threatening notes had begun arriving as soon as he started poking holes in the official story of Monroe's murder. But he'd needed confirmation that Riley was dirty, proof that the danger he sensed was real. Dylan shook his head bitterly. He understood Jason's logic, but believed the risk was far too high. Now there would be no hiding, no second chances. Jason had provoked a ruthless enemy, and they would strike back quickly and violently. Leaving Dylan, Jason moved cautiously toward home, senses heightened, Chase padding softly beside him. The dog suddenly stopped, ears perked sharply toward a dark sedan idling at the end of the street. Jason's heart jolted. He felt an icy awareness wash over him as the car's headlights abruptly snapped on. Without thinking, he tightened Chase's leash and sprinted into a nearby alley, footsteps pounding behind him almost instantly. Bullets sliced through the air, striking the brick walls beside them, sparks and debris showering down. The sedan roared closer, engine growling aggressively, headlights cutting harshly through the dark. Jason veered sharply, weaving through a maze of tight alleyways, his breath ragged. Tires squealed, doors slammed shut. Two shadowy figures emerged, guns drawn. Chase reacted without hesitation, lunging fiercely at the nearest attacker, biting down with relentless force, buying Jason critical seconds to regain his footing. A shot rang out, a sharp crack echoing off the walls, and Chase yelped sharply, staggering back slightly, blood seeping from a graze along his shoulder. Yet the dog stood firm, growling fiercely, ready to fight. Jason seized his opportunity, pulling Chase sharply away, ducking into an abandoned parking lot filled with rusted cars and discarded machinery. In the darkness, Jason cut the engine lights and crouched silently, holding his breath as the sedan sped past, failing to spot their makeshift hiding place. His hands trembled, partly from adrenaline, partly from anger at the ruthless pursuit that had nearly claimed both their lives. He whispered quiet reassurance to Chase, checking quickly. The wound was superficial, but the intent was clear. The Black Viper had tried to eliminate him, and nearly succeeded. His mind raced as he tended to Chase. If they'd sent professional killers after him this quickly, the conspiracy ran deeper and wider than he'd imagined. Nicole's innocence was clear to him now, but proving it before her execution seemed nearly impossible. Each moment mattered desperately, and yet the pressure threatened to suffocate him. He needed allies, but the avenues of trust had narrowed severely. Jason took Chase immediately to a trusted veterinarian, Lisa, who quickly cleaned and stitched the dog's wound. Lisa sensed Jason's urgency, but asked no questions, respecting the unspoken rule of confidentiality common among those who help law enforcement. As Jason watched Chase recover quietly, he realized this dog was more than just his protector. He was the last true partner Jason had left in this fight. Jason returned home cautiously, slipping inside his apartment to find yet another chilling anonymous note waiting ominously on his kitchen table. "Next time we won't miss. Drop it now." His jaw clenched. The stakes were starkly clear. The powerful forces he'd challenged wanted Nicole silenced permanently, and now they intended to silence him too. Yet Jason couldn't stop now. He spread the files across the table, staring at photos of Monroe, Lane, and now a third victim, Senator Alex Hartman, a vocal advocate for anti-corruption, found murdered under identical circumstances. And like before, authorities were quickly steering suspicion away from any obvious connections, actively ignoring the subtle mark left behind. It hit Jason coldly. The murders weren't random. They were part of a deliberate campaign of elimination. Each victim posed a threat to someone extremely powerful, someone high enough to pull strings within the system itself. The Black Viper was no simple crime ring. It was an arm of influence within the highest corridors of power. Jason's resolve hardened with each realization. He had become a target, not simply because he was looking into Nicole's wrongful conviction, but because he threatened to expose something infinitely darker, an entrenched conspiracy capable of manipulating everything from law enforcement to politics. He glanced down at Chase resting quietly nearby, the dog's gaze fixed on him with unwavering loyalty. Jason knew he was facing forces far beyond anything he'd encountered before. But stopping now would mean abandoning Nicole, betraying justice itself. Even with the odds stacked dangerously high, Jason knew his path. He would fight this battle, not only for Nicole, but for every innocent soul trampled by corrupt forces hiding behind a facade of law and order. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had his determination. Under the dim light of the makeshift investigation office, Jason sat hunched over a pile of documents spread across the table. Dylan sat opposite, tapping anxiously at his laptop, tracing shadowy financial trails that had begun to reveal an unsettling pattern. Offshore accounts, fake businesses, suspicious transactions, all threads leading back to a single, powerful figure who appeared repeatedly in their findings, Deputy Chief Ron Mitchell. Jason stared at the name again, feeling a familiar churn in his gut. Mitchell was respected, known for his clean image, the kind of man people trusted implicitly. But beneath that spotless exterior lay a deeply embedded darkness. Money flowed into Mitchell's accounts shortly before or after every murder linked to the Black Viper network. It wasn't just coincidence, it was deliberate funding disguised carefully, camouflaged through layers of shell companies and international fronts. Mitchell wasn't merely benefiting from the crimes. He orchestrated them from the highest levels of power. But Mitchell couldn't manage such a sophisticated operation alone. Jason knew there had to be others, people on the inside protecting him, shielding him from scrutiny. And as he continued digging, another familiar name surfaced: Detective Riley. Jason felt a hot surge of anger. He remembered clearly handing Riley the bloodied glove, the vital piece of evidence that could have shattered the entire conspiracy. Riley's calm acceptance, his unreadable expression, it all made sense now. Riley wasn't just complicit. He was actively sabotaging the investigation to protect Mitchell and their hidden criminal enterprise. Dylan slid a forensic report toward Jason. It confirmed what they'd already suspected. Traces of blood found on the glove belonged to a notorious hitman named Vincent Cade, whose name was repeatedly linked to high-profile assassinations over the last decade. Cade wasn't simply a hired killer. He was a key operative of the Black Viper itself. If Cade had left his DNA at Monroe's murder scene, Nicole was undeniably innocent. She'd been framed deliberately and carefully by Mitchell, Riley, and the hidden network they both served. Jason's jaw tightened as he stared at the report. Before handing the glove to Riley, he'd carefully cut a small fragment of the material, secretly sending it to an independent lab as a precaution. That piece was now their only physical evidence, the last remaining shred of hope. Riley had undoubtedly destroyed the original, confident he'd erased all traces. But Jason had learned to anticipate betrayal. Dylan asked quietly what Jason planned to do with this evidence. Jason remained silent for a moment, contemplating. His gaze moved to Chase, who rested quietly by his side, vigilant as always. Chase had saved him countless times already, his instincts always sharper than Jason's own. The dog had sensed danger when Jason couldn't, found crucial clues that human eyes had missed. Chase was more than a partner now. He was a lifeline, the only reliable ally Jason could trust completely. Jason decided he couldn't risk confronting Mitchell head-on. Mitchell was too smart, too careful, too entrenched. But Riley was different. Riley had proven reckless by accepting the glove openly. His arrogance and confidence made him vulnerable. If Jason cornered him, Riley would panic and slip, revealing the deeper truths about Mitchell and the Black Viper. Jason would exploit that weakness, using Riley's overconfidence against him. But just as Jason stood, ready to put his plan into motion, his phone vibrated urgently with a text message from an inside source. The news hit him like a gut punch. Senator Hartman had been murdered, and Jason himself was now the prime suspect. Security footage had appeared, perfectly clear images showing Jason near the scene, fingerprints matching his own found on the weapon, and even an eyewitness claiming to have seen him fleeing immediately afterward. It mirrored precisely what had happened to Nicole. Another meticulous setup, another attempt to bury the truth. Jason barely had time to process before sirens wailed outside his apartment, red and blue lights flashing through the blinds. They'd come for him faster than he'd anticipated. Instinctively, Jason grabbed the small fragment of glove evidence, shoving it into his jacket pocket. He called out sharply to Chase, signaling urgency. The dog responded immediately, leaping to his side without hesitation. As police officers stormed through the front door, shouting orders, Jason slipped quietly out the back entrance, heart pounding in his chest. Chase ran steadily beside him, both navigating quickly through alleys and side streets, pursued closely by officers determined to capture him. Jason knew that if he was caught now, there'd be no trial, no due process, just another swift execution masked as justice. He couldn't stop running, couldn't afford even the smallest misstep. His mind raced, searching desperately for options. Each street they passed offered potential hiding spots, but nowhere safe enough to evade pursuit completely. Jason realized his advantage lay in Chase. The dog's instincts had never been wrong. Chase could sense threats, find paths, detect dangers Jason couldn't perceive. He trusted the dog implicitly, willing himself to follow wherever Chase guided them. Suddenly, Chase pivoted sharply, guiding Jason through winding alleys toward an abandoned warehouse at the city's edge. The building was dark, isolated, exactly the kind of place they needed to vanish momentarily from sight. As they slipped inside, Jason caught his breath, glancing around quickly, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. What he saw next sent a chill down his spine. In the center of the cavernous warehouse stood rows of high-tech equipment, tables scattered with dozens of meticulously crafted biopolymer masks. Each mask represented a different identity, perfectly realistic faces capable of deceiving even sophisticated recognition software. But among these creations lay one mask in particular, one face that Jason recognized instantly, his own. A horrifying realization settled deep within him. Someone had meticulously crafted his identity, using it to murder Hartman, implicating him just as they had Nicole. Chase growled suddenly, sensing movement deeper within the shadows. Jason raised his gun, eyes straining into darkness. A figure stepped out calmly, hands raised mockingly, smiling with cold arrogance. Jason's blood ran cold. It was Riley. He had been expecting them. Riley spoke smoothly, taunting Jason, admitting he'd been careless, underestimated the persistence of a desperate man and his dog. But before Jason could respond, Riley dropped a smoke grenade, flooding the room instantly with choking smoke. Jason lunged forward blindly, Chase barking furiously beside him, but Riley vanished quickly, slipping away through a hidden exit into the night. Jason stood alone, heart pounding violently, anger boiling inside. He stared bitterly at the masks, the clear evidence of how completely the system had been corrupted, how utterly he'd been betrayed. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, he felt an unyielding resolve. Riley and Mitchell had pushed him to the brink, but they hadn't destroyed him. Not yet. Jason glanced down at Chase, the dog's steady eyes reflecting absolute trust. Together, they'd fight back, unmask the conspiracy, expose the darkness. The war was far from over. It had only just begun. Inside the grim concrete walls of the county jail, Nicole sat silently in the corner of her cramped cell, staring blankly ahead. Time here moved differently, a murky blur where days and nights lost their meaning. The only clear thing was the painful truth that had shattered her belief in the system she'd spent years serving. Being falsely accused and imprisoned had robbed her of more than just freedom. It stripped away trust, dignity, and faith in the justice she'd vowed to uphold. The whispers had reached her cell swiftly, the news that her execution date had suddenly been moved up, leaving her just days rather than months. Nicole knew exactly why. The powerful figures behind her framing had grown impatient, afraid she'd become a symbol of resistance, or, worse yet, expose their carefully orchestrated scheme. Moving swiftly, they'd forced the courts to expedite the process, ensuring she'd never again see daylight or have the chance to reveal the truth. But even as hopelessness threatened to consume her, one thought kept Nicole holding on: Chase. She remembered vividly the last time she'd seen him, struggling against officers dragging him from the courtroom, his barks echoing fiercely as if he knew the injustice being done. Chase wasn't just her partner. He was the only family she had left. She imagined him now, wherever he was, sensing her distress. That bond between them had always been strong, transcending words or commands. Nicole's mind drifted to memories that had once been joyful: training sessions with Chase, late-night patrols when the world slept, moments of quiet victory when they solved cases together. But now, those same memories felt distant, almost unreal. She knew Chase would never understand why she'd suddenly disappeared, why she no longer walked through the door after shifts, why he hadn't heard her voice in so long. The thought of his confusion, his pain, ate at her more than the impending execution itself. In the solitude of the cell, Nicole quietly observed the guards' routines, mapping their schedules, the security camera blind spots, every tiny vulnerability. If they were determined to end her life unjustly, she refused to make it easy. Her police training taught her that even the most secure prisons had weaknesses, weaknesses she planned to exploit. But she'd need chaos, a distraction to cover her escape. It came sooner than expected. Nicole seized a moment of opportunity during an argument among prisoners in the common area, strategically escalating tensions by provoking a particularly volatile inmate. Within seconds, the simmering tension erupted into a full-blown riot. Guards shouted, alarms blared, cell doors swung open as security rushed in, overwhelmed by the violent outburst. Nicole blended swiftly into the chaos, her every movement deliberate and focused. As inmates clashed and fought, she slipped unnoticed through hallways toward the emergency exit. Near the exit, a guard moved to block her way. Nicole acted instantly, overpowering him, grabbing his security badge and sprinting toward the outer perimeter. Outside, bright floodlights swung erratically, and police sirens wailed nearby. She moved quickly, commandeering an unattended patrol car, her hands steady despite the rush of adrenaline. As she sped away from the prison compound, bullets slammed against metal behind her, but she kept going, knowing hesitation meant death. Yet as she fled deeper into the night, Nicole realized escaping was just the beginning. They'd track her relentlessly, use every available resource to silence her permanently. She needed a safe haven, somewhere to plan her next move. Her mind immediately turned to Jason, hoping he'd somehow learned of her escape. He was resourceful and determined, the only ally she had left. Across town, Jason received the alert he'd been praying for. Nicole had broken free from jail. He knew exactly what she'd faced, the impossible odds she'd overcome. Jason also understood the grave danger she was now in. Authorities would pursue her aggressively, authorized to use lethal force. If they caught her again, she wouldn't survive the night. Without hesitation, he stood, grabbing essential files, motioning to Chase, who seemed already alert, as if sensing the urgency of their next move. Nicole sped down the darkened roads, scanning constantly for signs of pursuit. But just as she approached a deserted intersection, blinding headlights appeared ahead, blocking her path. A black SUV had cut her off, trapping her. Nicole's grip tightened instinctively on the steering wheel, heart racing, knowing escape would require immediate and drastic measures. Then, out of the darkness, a familiar, sharp bark pierced the air. Nicole turned swiftly toward the sound, her chest tightening as she saw Jason standing resolutely at the roadside, Chase by his side, barking furiously as if urging her onward. For a moment, relief flooded her, seeing Chase alive, knowing he'd never given up on her. But reality quickly intruded. Flashing red and blue lights suddenly appeared from every direction, converging on her position. She'd driven straight into a trap. Police surrounded Nicole swiftly, weapons drawn, orders shouted over loudspeakers. Chase struggled furiously against Jason's firm grip, desperate to reach, sensing the impending danger. Nicole caught Jason's gaze through the chaos, exchanging a brief, silent look, a plea to save himself and Chase. Her surrender now was inevitable. Resistance meant certain death for all three of them. Reluctantly, Jason understood, pulling Chase back, holding tight despite the dog's frantic protests. Nicole was swiftly handcuffed, roughly forced into custody, and thrown into the back of an unmarked vehicle. But instead of returning to prison, the vehicle headed in a different direction, taking unfamiliar roads deeper into isolated territory. Nicole realized with chilling clarity that her captors had no intention of following standard procedure. This wasn't another incarceration. It was a carefully planned execution, away from public eyes, eliminating her before Jason or anyone else could intervene. When the vehicle finally stopped, Nicole found herself in a secluded industrial facility, empty, except for shadowy figures waiting silently inside. One stepped forward confidently into the dim light, his face unmistakable, Deputy Chief Ron Mitchell himself. Mitchell's expression held a cold, mocking satisfaction, as if he'd always known this confrontation was inevitable. He'd orchestrated everything, using Nicole as a pawn in his deadly game, and now intended to tie up the final loose end. Nicole was roughly forced into a chair, her wrists tightly bound. Mitchell leaned close, calmly demanding she reveal how much she knew, warning her this was her final chance. Nicole said nothing. Mitchell sighed, indifferent, signaling his men. She knew then the interrogation was merely pretense. They intended her silence permanent and the truth forever buried. As darkness engulfed her, Nicole thought once more of Chase, wondering if he'd sense her final moments, if somehow her loyal dog understood the sacrifices she'd made, the love she'd always held for him. She knew Mitchell believed he was silencing the truth, but Nicole also knew Jason wouldn't stop searching. And Chase, bound by loyalty stronger than any conspiracy, would never rest until the truth was exposed. Jason drove furiously through empty streets, his thoughts spinning, heart pounding as if time itself raced against him. Beside him, Chase paced restlessly in the passenger seat, alert and agitated. They both knew Nicole had little time left. Every second was crucial. Jason's mind rapidly pieced together everything he'd uncovered, the deeper conspiracy, the corrupt network Mitchell had meticulously woven throughout the department, the courts, even the media. Mitchell had buried his secrets deep, confident they'd never surface, assured that Nicole would never escape to tell the truth. But Mitchell underestimated Jason's resolve, and even more, the extraordinary bond between Nicole and Chase, a connection stronger and more unyielding than anyone could predict. Jason had watched Chase's desperate attempts to reach Nicole at the ambush, sensing the dog's intuitive certainty that his partner faced mortal danger. It was that unwavering instinct, that fierce loyalty, which Jason counted on now. He steered the car toward a hidden access road that led toward the abandoned industrial district, Mitchell's clandestine playground. The GPS location on Jason's phone had pinpointed Nicole's last known signal before it vanished abruptly, confirming his worst fears. Mitchell wasn't bothering to hide his brutality any longer. The deputy chief had grown reckless, believing no one dared challenge him. Jason knew if Mitchell succeeded, the truth would remain forever entombed, Nicole's sacrifice forgotten. Arriving at the abandoned complex, Jason killed his headlights and coasted silently into a shadowy alcove. Chase immediately leaped out, moving decisively toward a weathered steel door hanging ajar, his instincts guiding them both. Jason drew his weapon, ready for confrontation. They slipped inside quietly, stepping through labyrinthine hallways, listening intently for any hint of Nicole. Within minutes, muffled voices echoed from deeper inside, punctuated by Mitchell's unmistakable arrogance, cold and casual. Jason's pulse quickened, recognizing Nicole's captor, realizing how close he'd come to losing her entirely. Chase moved purposefully ahead, guided by scents and sounds, stopping abruptly outside a half-open doorway. Jason carefully approached, glimpsing through a narrow gap. Mitchell stood calmly, speaking low, giving orders to the two guards beside him. Nicole sat, bound and exhausted, her eyes defiantly fixed on her captor despite the looming finality. The room itself exuded sinister intent, dim, isolated, ideal for secrecy. Jason knew he had to act decisively and swiftly. He stepped back quietly, evaluating tactics, understanding the danger of hesitation. In the split second he prepared to enter, Chase surged forward without warning, shoving the door open violently, launching himself directly at Mitchell. Chaos erupted instantly. Gunshots rang out, echoing sharply off concrete walls as the guards scrambled, disoriented. Mitchell stumbled backward, cursing loudly, knocked off balance by Chase's unexpected assault. Jason seized the advantage, stepping boldly into the fray, weapon trained steadily, voice commanding authority. In the confusion, Jason swiftly disarmed one guard, striking him to the floor. The second lunged clumsily forward, but Jason moved skillfully, incapacitating him quickly. Mitchell struggled desperately with Chase, attempting to fend off the dog's relentless attack, but Chase fought with purpose, refusing to yield, protecting Nicole instinctively. Jason swiftly freed Nicole from her restraints, helping her to her feet, eyes locked momentarily in a silent exchange, one of relief, gratitude, and urgency. Their reunion, brief but powerful, reinforced the mutual understanding of what needed to be done. Nicole regained her composure quickly, stepping confidently forward despite everything she'd endured, knowing her survival now meant the chance to finally expose Mitchell's corruption fully. Mitchell, momentarily free from Chase, stood cornered, eyes blazing with fury, realizing his carefully constructed web was unraveling completely. Jason aimed his gun steadily, demanding Mitchell's surrender. The deputy chief hesitated, glancing desperately toward the door, calculating escape. But there was none. The moment stretched tensely, filled with a lifetime of unsaid accusations, bitterness, and betrayal. Mitchell finally raised his hands slowly, glaring fiercely as Jason took him into custody, his defeat bitter and absolute. Chase circled protectively near Nicole, never leaving her side, sensing the significance of their victory. For the first time in weeks, Nicole allowed herself a genuine, heartfelt breath of relief, knowing she'd survived against impossible odds, thanks to Jason's courage and Chase's unwavering loyalty. Jason secured Mitchell firmly, warning him sternly to remain silent as distant police sirens began approaching. They had little time to secure evidence, knowing Mitchell's allies would swiftly mobilize to bury their truths again. Nicole moved decisively through Mitchell's belongings, gathering essential documents, incriminating evidence meticulously hidden, files detailing bribes, falsified reports, judicial manipulations that reached even deeper than she'd imagined. She recognized how high the stakes were, how essential it was that justice finally prevailed. When backup finally arrived, Jason carefully handed over custody of Mitchell, ensuring the officers who took him away had no links to his corrupt network. Jason and Nicole moved cautiously forward, knowing this fight wasn't yet fully finished. That exposure alone wouldn't dismantle the entrenched corruption. But they also knew their resilience had shattered Mitchell's illusion of invincibility. Stepping outside into the cool night, Nicole paused briefly, looking toward Jason, silently communicating gratitude deeper than words could convey. Then she knelt gently, embracing Chase, acknowledging the bravery and loyalty he'd shown through every ordeal. Chase pressed closely to her, quiet and calm, sensing their victory, perhaps understanding they'd narrowly escaped disaster together. Jason stood quietly nearby, heart heavy with gratitude and relief, realizing how precariously close they'd come to losing everything, yet how powerful they'd emerged. He knew the evidence they'd uncovered, the truths they'd revealed, would change everything, challenging a corrupt system, bringing hope where there had been none. But most profoundly, Jason recognized the immeasurable strength found in loyalty, courage, and the bond between Nicole and Chase, something far more powerful than any conspiracy could ever destroy. As police lights flooded the scene, illuminating the truths they'd revealed, Nicole stood resolutely, unafraid, her resolve hardened by everything she'd endured. Beside her, Jason and Chase waited calmly, unified in purpose, aware they'd just begun a new fight. One that promised redemption, justice, and the chance to finally heal from wounds no corruption could ever fully erase. In the weeks following Mitchell's arrest, the city seemed transformed. Scandal ignited headlines, unraveling webs of deceit woven through the city's core institutions. Judges stepped down, officials resigned, and whispers of reform spread rapidly. Yet Jason knew better than to mistake this initial victory for lasting change. True justice was patient work, measured not in dramatic headlines, but in quiet, persistent acts of integrity. Nicole's testimony was pivotal, resonating deeply through courtrooms packed with eager observers. She became an instant figurehead, reluctantly admired, quietly heroic. Despite the overwhelming support, Jason noticed a heaviness settle around her, the weight of sudden attention shadowing her movements. Yet, whenever Nicole spoke publicly, she focused not on herself, but on the countless voices silenced by corruption, emphasizing the collective struggle over her individual triumph. Chase, meanwhile, returned swiftly to duty. The bond between Nicole and Chase deepened profoundly, visible even to outsiders as a quiet understanding born from trials most could scarcely imagine. Jason watched them together at community events, children flocking eagerly around Chase, laughing joyfully, oblivious to the magnitude of what they'd survived. These moments were subtle reminders to Jason of why he'd chosen to wear a badge in the first place, reaffirming the simple yet profound truth that goodness and decency still thrived beneath layers of shadows. As months passed, Jason worked tirelessly alongside internal affairs and federal investigators, methodically dismantling remnants of Mitchell's network. The task was arduous, often frustratingly slow, filled with setbacks and discouraging revelations. He faced threats, intimidation, and pressure from powerful figures still hoping to preserve their hidden interests. But each night, when doubt whispered at his resolve, Jason thought of Nicole and Chase, their quiet resilience, unwavering courage, and the simple conviction that right must eventually overcome wrong. One evening, after a particularly grueling deposition, Jason found himself alone with Nicole at a small diner near downtown. Over coffee, they shared a rare moment of peace, reflecting quietly on all they'd endured. Their conversation gradually drifted toward the future, not just theirs, but the city's. Nicole's voice was steady, passionate as she outlined her ideas for advocacy programs, community oversight committees, and stronger protections for whistleblowers. Listening to her vision, Jason felt a renewed sense of purpose and clarity, sensing how much stronger they'd become through shared adversity. Days turned into weeks, then months, and the city's initial fervor for reform slowly settled into sustained, meaningful action. Community engagement surged, new accountability measures emerged, and slowly but noticeably, trust between the public and law enforcement began mending. Though scars remained evident, healing had begun, visible in countless small acts of integrity rippling outward, steadily reshaping the community's heart. Nicole, embracing her newfound role, traveled extensively, speaking openly about her experiences, courageously recounting truths once forcibly hidden. Her words resonated powerfully, inspiring others to come forward, giving strength to those still afraid. Jason watched proudly from afar, deeply moved by the transformation she'd undergone, from victim to advocate, from silence to powerful voice. Through Nicole, Jason saw clearly the profound resilience inherent within people, the capacity to turn suffering into purpose, pain into strength. Chase, celebrated widely, remained humbly unchanged, loyal and steadfast beside Nicole, an unwavering guardian whose quiet dignity spoke volumes without words. Jason recognized in Chase an embodiment of devotion and simplicity, a reminder that heroism wasn't confined to dramatic gestures, but found profoundly in quiet constancy, in daily, faithful acts of courage and kindness. Eventually, Jason chose to step back from the frontline investigative work. His role shifted toward training younger officers, sharing openly about the challenges he'd faced, the temptations he'd resisted, and the personal costs of true integrity. Many listened closely, absorbing lessons born from real experience, recognizing in Jason not a detached lecturer, but a living example of quiet bravery. On a warm spring afternoon, Jason, Nicole, and Chase reunited informally, walking leisurely through the city's Central Park. They passed memorials, playgrounds, and community gardens, places transformed through collective efforts, symbols of renewal and hope. As they walked together, ordinary citizens approached warmly, thanking them sincerely, sharing their own small stories of bravery, gratitude, and quiet resilience. Standing together near a newly dedicated monument commemorating whistleblowers and advocates, Nicole paused briefly, her gaze lingering thoughtfully on the engraved words, powerful in their simplicity. Truth requires courage. Jason observed her quietly, understanding deeply how profoundly those three words summarized their journey. Returning slowly through the park, Jason noticed a young officer approaching hesitantly. The officer nervously introduced himself, speaking quietly of his admiration for Jason's work, expressing sincere gratitude for the sacrifices Jason had made to uphold integrity. Jason responded warmly, encouraging the young officer gently, reminding him quietly that true justice wasn't measured solely in heroic headlines, but in daily acts of courage, honesty, and compassion. the quiet choices made away from public view. In that small exchange, Jason realized the true measure of their victory wasn't merely in Mitchell's downfall, nor even in the sweeping reforms enacted. Rather, it lay in each quiet decision inspired, each subtle ripple of courage and integrity spreading silently outward, touching lives they'd never know. Justice, Jason understood, wasn't solely about punishment, but ultimately about hope, about believing deeply that individual bravery, honesty, and kindness could slowly, steadily, and irrevocably transform the world. As the afternoon softened gently into evening, Jason, Nicole, and Chase stood together quietly, bound deeply by experiences shared and trials endured. Around them, life continued peacefully, unaware of their silent struggles, yet undeniably shaped by them. Jason felt profoundly grateful for friendships forged through adversity, for courage discovered amid darkness, and above all, for the quiet strength that sustained them all, proving unmistakably that even in the harshest circumstances, hope and integrity would always find a way. And perhaps he thought silently, that was the most important truth of all, that the most powerful change didn't always come dramatically or loudly, but arrived quietly, persistently, and courageously, born from the everyday heroism of ordinary lives. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our story today. Your support and attention mean the world to us. Through this story, we hope you've gained insights into courage, integrity, and perseverance. Life often presents challenges, but standing firm in truth and justice will always lead us down the right path. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting our channel by simply pressing the like button. We'd love it if you left a comment below, letting us know which country you're from and sharing your thoughts or feelings about today's story. Your feedback inspires us to continue creating meaningful content and connecting with wonderful people like you around the globe. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with future stories and content. Your subscription truly motivates and encourages us to grow and improve. Thank you once again for your kindness and support. We look forward to bringing you more inspiring stories soon.